Mirë se erdhët në Public Square. Unë jam Ditmir Bushati. Sot do të flasim për pritshmëritë rreth zgjedhjeve parlamentare dhe presidenciale që do të mbahen në pak javë në Maqedoninë e Veriut. Jo thjesht nga pikpamja e marrëdhënieve dhe ndërveprimit ndëretnik mes maqedonasve dhe shqiptarëve, që janë dy komunitetet kryesore shtetformuese, por mbi të gjitha rreth sfidave me të cilat përballet vendi fshinj, rreth pritshmërive të qytetarëve në vendin fshinj. Si mund të kthehen këto sfida në një mundësi? Cila është analiza kryesore për Maqedoninë e Veriut? Kam ftuar ish-ministrin e punëve të jashtme Nikola Dimitrov, i cili që nga dhjetori i vitit të kaluar ka krijuar një platformë qytetare që e quajnë Imagjino, me shpresën që apatinë politike ta kthejnë dhe transformojnë në një energji pozitive për Maqedoninë e Veriut. Nikola, welcome to Public Square.
Thank you so much, Ditmir. Great to be here.
I would like to start our discussion by asking you a question regarding the political scene in North Macedonia as the country is going through parliamentary and presidential elections in few weeks. What's your assessment?
Opposition is in the lead, especially among the ethnic Macedonians. So VMRO DPMNE has a decisive lead over the Social Democrats. It will be more exciting and more interesting among the ethnic Albanians because it looks like Ali Ahmeti's DUI will face a challenge for the first time in its political history. Looking at the polls, the mood in the society, in the public debates, it's actually difficult to say who will prevail among the voters, among the ethnic Albanians. Now, apart from that, there is not much optimism that even a change of power will actually fix the country. That will be enough. A recent poll that my organization commissioned in the second half of January, citizens said that about 73-74% say this government, the current government, doesn't deserve a second chance, a new mandate. But at the same time, about 60% don't think that a victory of the opposition will actually help solve their problems. So there is a big part of the citizens who may decide not to vote, which will be regrettable, or they don't really see a convincing political offer.
What are the main challenges, according to your viewpoint, for the next government and the next president of the republic, according to the mood of citizens, regardless of their ethnicity?
When it comes to inter-ethnic relations, the poll I mentioned says that Macedonians and Albanians agree that the relations are not a problem. People who think inter-ethnic relations are a problem, it's about 4% on both sides of the ethnic spectrum. So essentially the nation agrees that the big problems are common, and those are corruption and crime. About 1/3 of the people say that this is the biggest problem. The second one is low income and poverty. That's together they compose about 25%. In a way, the nation learned a bitter lesson because we saw that when we toppled Gruevski, there was optimism that we will move on, that finally we're going to start the accession talks, that the country will be better off. We learned the lesson that changing power is good, but it's not enough to change a failing system. So when this hope was betrayed, because of the continuation of the governance based on clientelism. To become a teacher, you need party backing. To get a job in a hospital as a young doctor, you need party backing. There is too much party political influence among public prosecutors and judges, according to the public opinion. So I think the key challenge for North Macedonia in the following period is how do we get out of this apathy and a feeling that people have given up and turn the energy into action again. Push for political parties to become better, push for the system to deliver better for the citizens. I think this is the key challenge.
When you speak about political apathy in North Macedonia, it reminds me Albania, and it looks to me that this is more or less a feature shared across the region, partly due to the fact that the young generation is leaving the region, and those that are more skillful and more educated are going in a northern part of Europe or in US. And this is putting into question mark also the expected change in our societies. And recently I know you have established this initiative called Imagine, and I would be very much interested to hear your views about the aims of this civic platform or of this initiative.
We established Imagine last December, so it's a relatively new initiative. We have a core group of citizens, some more in the academic spheres, PhDs from the UK and the US and countries in the EU, and some who are fighters, not to say that these two are mutually exclusive. So, for instance, the union of the president of the Union of the Flight Controllers is also our activist. The key goal is to, in a way, we realize that politics is too important to be left only to political parties. It's not enough for people to hope that one morning political party leaders and their executive bodies will wake up saying, okay, we overdid it, now we're going to do better. It's not enough to hope that our friends from Brussels and Washington, DC, will fix our problems. That people, especially if they create networks and if they agree to act together on a set of principles, and our principles are more meritocracy, there is too much ours and theirs in terms of political parties and appointments. Why not have a good manager of a public company? Who cares whether he's a part of a political party or she or not, if the job is well done? So meritocracy is one of our bigger principles, then equality before the law, then how to shrink the political cake, how to take political party influences out from the health sector, out from the educational sector, and out of the rule of law institutions. Public prosecutors should be public prosecutors. They should serve the public interest and the people, not this or that political party, and the same goes to judges.
Nikola, what's your explanation why in the Southeast Europe we see a network of political parties being in power for first, second, third term, and some aspiring even for the fourth term? And all these countries at the same time are queuing to become EU members. and this is in sharp contrast from the experience of Central and Eastern European countries when they were in the process of joining EU. Because of the reforms they undertook, they lost power. And then we have seen more rotations, more political rotations. We have seen more independent institutions, more autonomous institutions in the case of Central and Eastern European countries. Where is EU in this initiative? So why to have such an initiative like Imagine in this moment?
Like you, Ditmir, I've spent most of my professional career, initially as a diplomat for a long time, and then I call myself sometimes an accidental politician, having no party membership, then as a foreign minister, to achieve the strategic goals of the nation. To join NATO, we did that. To join the EU. I've realized over a number of years that the EU accession process is the best tool available for reforms and transformation of our societies. There is a but. There are two buts, actually. To work, there has to be a domestic force in the society, in the political system, that will push for reforms, that will take reforms seriously. And second, for this accession process to work, it has to be real. Politicians, political leaders, voters need to see that when they deliver, the EU delivers as well. Now, this conditionality has been somewhat watered down in the last years. I think both in the Albanian society, in your republic, and in the Macedonian society, in North Macedonia, a huge majority of the people dream to become part of the European Union, but an increasing number of citizens realize that this is actually taking too long, and they wonder whether the EU is actually serious when it talks about the European perspective. And I see another challenge related to your question. To what extent our European friends are principled partners, are principled friends? To what extent they opt for, let's say, political stability, or some of our friends call that Stabilokracia. These are the dominant leaders, we need to work with them. And do they sometimes turn a blind eye to obvious shortcomings, sometimes even backsliding on important issues? We have gone from years of hope after the colorful revolution, 2017, 2018, when we fell short because the promise was not met both for Tirana and Skopje, initially because of France and then the new methodology. In a way, people started doubting that, whether EU is serious. And especially in the last 2 years, the European narrative has been compromised by our government, because they have put the European flag. I don't know whether you have it in Tirana. We have a parliamentary procedure for aligning with the acquis that is shorter and takes less time and prevents filibustering by the opposition if it's about transposing European legislation into domestic law. Now, this procedure has been abused, among other things, to amend the criminal code, essentially to strengthen impunity for public officials. This has been criticized in the latest report by the European Commission, and the government defense was they did it in the context of of the constitutional amendments which are needed for the second intergovernmental conference. Then there were attempts to bring back Gruevski. The alibi, the excuse was also the constitutional amendments, but it became clear that all this was done for political power, to improve the chances for getting more votes, making the opposition weaker, perhaps, challenge the current leadership of the opposition, etc., etc. So if Gruevski was using nationalism to cover for bad governance, ironically, this government, especially in the last 2 years, has been using the European narrative to cover for bad governance. And as Michael Martens, a journalist for the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, put it in his title about this, corruption in the name of the EU. Yeah. So the European narrative has been turned upside down.
Where is European Union into this equation? Because following a bit from Tirana, the political developments in Skopje, and hearing the rhetoric of the main political actors there, it gives you a wrong impression that there are two political camps. One that is fighting hard for EU, and the other one that is blocking somehow this process. So my question to you is, how do you see the role of European Union and US in this respect when they convey messages about the European trajectory that could be derailed because of the elections or because of the outcome of the elections?
EU reforms is less about opening chapters, even though we've been dreaming of opening chapters for 2 decades. EU reforms is about doing the work at home. And I think people, voters, have starting to realize that. And I think our friends among the international community will probably move in that direction as well. Because when they support, perhaps without enough criticism, political elites in this or that Balkan country, they lose credibility in the eyes of the people, because it's not enough to solve bilateral issues to be pro-European. You also need to be honest, and you need to fight against corruption and not make corruption. I think what Europe should do, what the European Union should do, is, in the geopolitical context of today, is put a tangible, realistic offer for the countries of the region. A time frame will also help. It's not helping that some member states say, we would love to see enlargement, but we need to fix the union on the inside first. They need to solve this. They need to solve this problem. And when this perspective becomes more imminent, foreseeable in few years' time, then they need to really push and help us, because when Albanian citizens, when Macedonian citizens go to Germany and Switzerland, they make a good living, they make good careers, they're successful. So I don't think I don't buy the argument that somehow it's in our mentality to have a failing system. It's not about the people. It's about how do we do governance and politics, and maybe not enough recognition that citizens, if we make up our minds, can make change. And this change will never come from the sky on its own. We need to make it happen.
I fully agree with you. And here I'd like to focus a bit our discussion on your experience during the negotiations and conclusions of Prespa Agreement. Because I see Prespa as a process, but also as an agreement, as a milestone of change, peace, and prosperity in our region. So, a few years after Prespa, what are the main lessons you can share with us and also with others in the region? I know the terrible mistake of EU after you did that, because EU was not able to deliver. And I know that this was not a good example also for Serbia and Kosovo, because there were no incentives. But what are your main lessons?
To solve, first of all, thank you for the way you presented the Prespa Agreement. We actually used to meet a lot when we were both foreign ministers serving our countries at that time. You were also involved in negotiations. I was involved with negotiations with our friend Nikos, Minister Kotsias at the time. Now, briefly, maybe few of the lessons that come to mind first. One, to solve a difficult bilateral dispute that has been unsolved, lingering, entrenched over a number of years, one needs to realize that this will not score you political points, not in the short run. People need to be ready to invest political capital. And so the incentive will not be the next elections. You have to have as an incentive the well-being of the nation. And then work on that, try to convince your compatriots that this was the right thing to do. Second, to solve a big problem between neighbors, you have to address the key concern on both sides. If only one neighbor is happy, then the issue is not solved. And then to do it, you need to trust the other side, and this trust doesn't come easy. So in the process, one has to invest in building this mutual trust, both at a personal level and then government to government. These big solutions also need to be implemented. This takes dedication and commitment from both sides. There are a number of things that are still to be done with regard to the Prespa Agreement. But the key is that after the Prespa Agreement, if you analyze the opinion polls both in Greece and in North Macedonia, one can see that there is less of an issue, there is less of a problem. And Greece dropped from the list of our adversaries, where the first place is now safely reserved for Bulgaria. And at the same time, every once in a while, Greece pops up on our list of friends. And I think the same goes for the Greek public opinion. This was not an easy compromise, but I think it was the right thing to do. Now, we as a region are spending too much time into competitions that are not helping our children. Who is the oldest nation in the Balkans? Or maybe in the world? We don't compete who is most successful in digitalization. Sometimes we compete who has been the biggest victim of history. So I think we need to replace this with solving our issues and addressing our neighbors based on the premise that if Albania succeeds to have big economic growth, to start the accession talks, it will be good for the region. If Montenegro does something similar, it will be good for Tirana. If we do it finally in Skopje, it's so more togetherness and more healthy competition. And it's not only the candidate countries. I think this competition applies to our friends and neighbors who are in the EU already. We don't have much time. You mentioned the brain drain. I think we face a common challenge throughout the region. I don't know whether we have 10 years or maybe 15 years, but I know that we don't have too much time to turn this around.
Speaking a little bit about the place that has been reserved now for Bulgaria, as you put it in a bit cynical way, I know you have been quite critical about the way how the current government in North Macedonia managed disagreements with Bulgaria, and I know very well that you have been critical about the use of veto by Bulgaria. And I will never forget also our regional meetings where colleagues and friends from the neighboring countries of EU were trying also to teach us lessons about how EU is working. And paradoxically now we are in this situation. What's going wrong in this respect, and how this can be fixed? And how this can also set a good example for others in the region. So not blackmailing, but the way how this can be somehow overcome.
My key problem with the current attempted solution with Bulgaria was the fact that the European accession process, where Copenhagen criteria should be the key criteria, rule of law reforms, public administration reforms, etc., media freedom, the health of our democracies, was actually merged with a bilateral issue that is really difficult to address because it touches upon issues of identity and historical narratives. So many of our friends, we've had the same, to some extent, colleagues among the foreign ministers of the European Union member states, used to tell me, Nikola, we will never allow this to happen. The bilateral issue should be separate from the accession process, because if we make this precedent, this will be a Pandora's box for enlargement. Who knows how Hungary will deal with Ukraine in the future if we do this, and other examples. So there was no European pressure on Skopje to accept this merger of identity and history with an accession process based on the Copenhagen criteria. And when this government decided to say yes to this, when I called some capitals in Europe, they told me, well, what can we do if your country say yes, if your government says yes? It's very difficult for us to now block this. So, and what is the result of this merger of these two different sets of issues? They distract from the real reforms, and you spend all the attention and the energy of the nation in dealing with an issue that is not very rational. Because in 21st century Europe, no matter how you read history and what is your historical narrative, the identity of your neighbor is not your business. It is their business. So, and the whole story is very sad because in a very short period, let's say 2-3 years, from an opening of our relationships with Bulgaria. We are now, I don't recall actually a worse time for Macedonian-Bulgarian relations because especially among ethnic Macedonians, but even majority of ethnic Albanians in the opinion polls see Bulgaria as the biggest problem of the nation. So trade has decreased, people-to-people contacts have decreased, tourism has decreased, and in some ways, this blackmail on something that is so sensitive, I don't know whether your viewers are familiar, but official Sofia sent an official declaration to Brussels to say that they will never recognize the Macedonian language. Now, this is not a behavior befitting an EU member state. And as we need to grow up, Bulgaria should also grow up. And in order to have a proper European relationship with understanding, which is because a European relationship must be based on mutual respect. You cannot look down. And as I told once former Prime Minister Tsipras, especially for the bigger countries in our region, how big they are is not only about population and territory. It's also how do they treat their smaller neighbors. So when you look down to your neighbor, you're not bigger, you're smaller.
Similarities are quite striking and quite unfortunate because we condemn what Putin and Russia is doing in Ukraine by saying that Ukraine statehood does not exist, the language does not exist, the country does not exist. Then you hear officials in Bulgaria saying that Macedonian language does not exist. Then you have Serbian officials saying Kosovo statehood does not exist. And then you have this web of disputes and disagreements that are not helping regional cooperation and democratic stability in our region. My very last question to you, as we were smiling and laughing with each other also in the past, we used to call our countries professional candidates because you have been a candidate country since 2005, Albania since 2014 for different reasons, of course. You have gone also through some hard, let's say, measures. So your former prime minister has been put on the sanctions list of US and some other high officials. Same holds true also for Albania. You have gone through a special prosecution unit. We are also through a special prosecution unit. So I don't know. I mean, the history will judge whether those measures were really effective and brought the expected change in our respective societies. But as the last question, I'm more interested about the soft power of EU and soft power of international friends, how they can help us, provided that we are doing our homework, as you are doing right now with your civic platform, Imagine.
I sometimes at different panels in Europe say that the region of the Western Balkans is one room in the European house. We are geographically within the European Union. And it's not good for the house, for this room to be dark, not to be plugged in the electricity system of the house or the heating system of the house and the water supplies, etc., etc. So especially when the geopolitical, let's say, order of Europe has been completely compromised with the Russian aggression against Ukraine, it's really time to fix our house. And Europe should and could do this in few years' time. And to do it, they need to give us that message, because at the same time, we in the region need to wake up. The pro-reform forces of the region need to take these few years seriously. And this should go hand in hand with, as among friends, difficult truths are set between personal friends. They should also tell us to our face that our judges are not independent enough, that the media are not free enough, that you cannot become a politician to become rich and steal, because sometimes I think our politics has become a way to make a living, to become rich, essentially through corruption, and then you invest efforts not to be responsible, not to face criminal proceedings. This should not be politics. Politics is about fixing our countries and leaving something better for the next generation. So when our friends come to our capitals and they say nice words, it's good for the ears, and on the surface we're all happy, but this is not a favor. They have to say the truth, and at the same time they need to be honest, and they need to give us a real offer, because I think we are becoming tired of the message. We have reaffirmed the European perspective for the Western Balkans. To put the European perspective that has been promised since the Thessaloniki summit in 2003, 2 decades ago, when you promise something for 20 years and not much is happening, the promise is not enough.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you in Public Square.